Hi everybody, this is another video by Skully. I want to talk about a very important topic today. There's really no sugarcoating it because there's some things in life that just can't be sugarcoated. They have to be raw, they have to be real, and they have to be faced because that's reality. This is a topic that I'm sure most people have heard of and probably even dealt with some point in their life, whether with themselves or another person. It is not a happy topic. It is very dark, but it needs to be mentioned because the less we talk about it, the more it happens. The more people are affected, the more people are hurt, and the more pain that goes around. If you find topics that are very dark, depressing, that talk about things like death, depression, this video may not be for you. And that's okay, because these topics are very hard to talk about. This will be here later on if you choose to watch it at a later date, and if you choose not to, that's fine as well. You're free to move on to happier things if that's what's best for you, and sometimes it is. What I wanted to talk about today is death and suicide, particularly suicide. For the sake of this video and not overusing that word too much and upsetting people more than necessary, I'm going to refer to it as active SI instead, the I meaning ideation. Most people in their life have had active SI probably at some point. Not everybody, some people don't. But the thoughts they come up from time to time. So why is it that some people choose to act on this and take matters into their own hands rather than waiting for things to get better? Well, sometimes people do wait for things to get better, and they either don't or they don't get better fast enough. Sometimes people lose hope. Sometimes people get desperate. Most common reason is because people, not always because they don't want to be here anymore, sometimes because they don't want to be here anymore, because there are things in life that can make us feel that way. Some people honestly do it because they want the pain to stop so badly, and they don't know how to get the pain to stop. So they take matters into their own hands. Some people feel like that things are better off without them. Sometimes they're done and that's it. They just don't want to do it anymore. Life gets very hard sometimes. Sometimes even on the greatest of days, people still feel sadness. Some people can get up and keep going more than others. For some people, it's not that simple. They feel like they can't escape from their pain or their problems, and they feel like they have no other option. Now, sometimes these people can be reminded how important they are and how much their family loves them, and maybe even how hurt their family or friends would be if they weren't here anymore. I'm sure that more times than not people have taken this kind of stuff into consideration, but it doesn't change what they're going through, and it doesn't change how they feel. So they may still do it anyway. And like I said, just to try to get some sort of relief or get some sort of out. Sometimes to people, death, even on their own accord, is means to an end. Maybe they see better things there than they do here. And depending on what's going on in their life, it's very hard to convince them otherwise. So, what can you do for people that are going through things like this? Well, sometimes even if you don't know the person very well, or if you don't talk to them very often, you can still try your best to reach out and just simply be a listening ear to them. Not everybody wants to talk about these feelings, even if they do have them, because they're very, very personal and they're very serious. So sometimes the best thing you can do is just be a listening ear. And even if they don't want to talk about it at that moment, just let them know, well, if you want to talk about this later on, I'm still here. Always be here, always be a listening ear. You can talk to me anytime you want. And maybe they'll take you up on that offer at some point. And maybe they won't. There's really no predicting what people will do in these kind of situations. If you ever have a friend or anybody you know who's either vaguely hinting that they may be suicidal or depressed, or even just have occasional thoughts of this kind of stuff, it really needs to be acknowledged. Sometimes people can we all have that one friend who makes dark humor, dark jokes, and maybe that is their humor. Some people do. But then there's people, they do make kind of mentions to these kind of topics. Sometimes indirect, sometimes they will straight out say that they have active SI or thoughts of it, and that they don't want to be here anymore for whatever reason. No matter how innocent it may sound, or severe, you should always treat it like it's the real thing. Because the one time that you don't treat it like the real thing could be the one time that they actually decide to attempt to go through with it and possibly even succeed. And it only takes one time. It only takes one day to ignore the warning signs. It only takes dismissing one joke or anything. And even if you have the friend that's very melodramatic when they're sad, don't assume that they're just being melodramatic, because even though people can be, they can also be serious. So you should always take it seriously, even if it seems mild. Sometimes you may have to go out of your way to try to reach out to either to that person or even their family. And truth be told, if you do reach out to their family, they could be very, very hurt and upset because they may feel betrayed. But hopefully, someday they will realize it's because you had good intentions and because you're a good friend to them and you care about them. So, honestly, if they are angry or upset with you, which can happen, sometimes it's better to just take that chance and just be sure that they're okay. Because when they're healthy again someday, they may actually be grateful at some point. And sometimes it's very hard to help people that don't want to help themselves, and sometimes you have to take it up a notch to be sure they get the help they need. And there's nothing wrong with maybe sometimes these people can seek out therapy and get help, and sometimes they don't, because like I said, they don't want to talk about it, or maybe they're even afraid. Because if they never have tried therapy before, it can be very scary talking to a stranger and opening up to them about your problems. But when they realize it's for the greater good, and maybe once they realize how rewarding and how helpful it is, maybe they might, go to one session and then give it another chance later on. So, yeah, there's no worse feeling in the world than knowing somebody, and we all probably know at least one person, who maybe they seemed fine at first, maybe they didn't. Maybe you assumed everything was okay in their life because they seemed fine. Maybe the warning signs were there, but maybe you didn't see them, maybe because you didn't want to, or maybe you did, but maybe you thought you were being too paranoid and everything was actually fine, and maybe it wasn't. But sometimes it can only take missing those hints one time and that person going off on their own, not saying a word, and kind of taking matters into their own hands. When people hear about depression and active SI, they tend to think of this stereotype picture of somebody who's been maybe spending hours in their bed crying and crying and crying and not hardly getting up out of bed to do anything like eat or take care of themselves, which there are some people with depression that are very emotional, and it's more apparent that they're depressed because they show sadness and just troubling symptoms like that. But there are people that are also sad. Maybe it's more angry, because some people, they get angry instead of upset to kind of help fight back that sadness. There's also people that just don't say anything at all, because some people, rather than depression just being sadness, being depressed can also just being numb. Maybe you feel nothing but negative feelings, or maybe you're just so overwhelmed by grief that it kind of just numbs you and you don't really feel anything after a while. Sometimes one of the hardest things about being depressed is not only just being sad, but maybe you try to do things that you used to enjoy, like watching your favorite movie, and you don't feel anything. You don't feel happiness. You feel like you're an empty vessel of what you used to be, and that's a very terrible feeling. So, paying attention to these signs whether in somebody else or in yourself, is very important because they can and do escalate if they are not addressed properly. It's so terrible feeling like it's like you know somebody who that's happened to. You wish so badly you could turn back time, turn back the clock, reach into that person's life and try to help them and solve all their problems to prevent them from doing that. But the truth is, there's always the possibility that people can do that stuff anyway, even if you tried to help. Getting rid of that guilt, I mean, it's probably always there to some degree. It's a very terrible feeling. I mean, even talking about it in the past tense, like people might be like, okay, well, it's in the past, you can't change it. Well, no, you can't change it. That's the worst part about it. Always looking back on that person's face in your memory and telling yourself, why? Why didn't I reach out? Why didn't I say something? Could I have done anything? Could I have raced and saved them? Could I have prevented this tragedy? Would my actions have done anything to stop what happened? Or would the end result have been the same? And then knowing not only that it's like this bad dream you can't wake up from, but that was somebody's son, somebody's brother, sister, daughter, niece, somebody's something that's gone forever. And if you remember even one distinct time before the tragedy took place, or maybe, just maybe, you could have stopped them from such an awful fate, maybe things would be different. Maybe things would have changed. And that stuff, it can drive you insane. Replaying it in your head over and over again. Looking back at all the signs, even if they were very subtle. Like maybe you saw them just one last time, like a week or so before it happened. And maybe you glanced over at them for a second and saw this look of pain, this look of sadness, and then you think to yourself, that was right in front of me. I sat right there and looked at them with that painful expression. Why didn't I know something was wrong? But then if it was the quiet, silent type person that didn't say absolutely anything at all, they kept it to themselves, even if in your heart you had a feeling something was wrong, even if you couldn't prove it to yourself, so you think, okay, well, I mean, maybe I'm just overreacting, maybe I'm being paranoid, and then it ends up happening. Well, I guess you just can't look back on those memories the same way now because you just start tormenting yourself with the amount of guilt. And the truth is, it may not have been your fault at all. Maybe it was just going to happen one way or the other. But the thing is, a lot of these things are preventable to a degree. Maybe not entirely, but like there are certain things you can do to try to maybe change the outcome. Because at the end of the day, once that stuff happens, there's no more second chances to try to help that person. There's just, it happened, and trying to find a way to live with it, so to speak. And I don't know, even years later, even once time has passed, even once others have forgotten about it, it won't stop the guilt you feel, the nightmares you have. And maybe some days are easier than others. Because maybe you finally get to a point where you realize, well, maybe that person would want me to be happy. Maybe they wouldn't blame me for it because maybe that's just truly what they wanted. And they made their own choice, which, I mean, okay, yeah, but they were still a person with feelings. They were important to you in your life, and they were important to somebody else too. So, I mean, this is, like I said, this is something that has to be talked about because it's happened to too many people. Too many lives have been claimed way too soon. And with all the chaos that's happened in 2020 and coronavirus, people having to be in quarantine, people being sick, people even losing relatives from the virus or anything else, along with just the mental illness that will probably be more prevalent as a result of coronavirus and all the trauma it caused. Well, there are people who are still struggling with these feelings. They may have even had them even before this happened, but traumas like this make the most awful emotions surface at the most unexpected times. So, with that being said, yeah, I know people that's been happening to during all this. So I decided I really wanted to try to help people as best as I can. Because I don't want to go through another tragedy like that again. I don't want to watch another loved one, even somebody I knew barely. I don't want to watch another person get put to rest and think maybe I could have been the thing stopping them from that early grave. I guess I'll never know, but at least I can maybe try to help some other people. I won't bring back the ones I failed, but somebody has to keep trying if we want to stop these tragedies from happening more so in the future. If you've managed to sit through this entire video and listen to me talk about this, thank you very much for your time. And I'm sorry if this is such a depressing video to talk about, but ignoring these things is not going to make them stop. It's just going to make it worse. And it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy where you don't listen to one person or another. There's only so many people in this world, so many loved ones in your life. You definitely got to do things while they're here to keep them here. I mean, love is just so important in general, especially in the darkest of times. And if you or someone you know is struggling with things like this, don't be afraid to reach out to crisis hotlines, medical professionals, seek therapy, or even just trying to take life one day at a time and try to make things better for yourself and for people around you as well. Because sometimes the best thing that we can do in life is so unbearably hard like this, is to just take things one day at a time. My sister told me once, when I was freaking out about a lot of things, she said something like, they didn't build Rome in one day. As cheesy as it was, she's right. But we can take life one day at a time and try to live each day to its fullest, because in the end we only have one life, one us. Take care of yourselves during all this and in general, because you're important, you're special, and you are loved. The rainbow always comes after the storm. Stick around and see what life has to offer you, because it's worth living.